Hey guys, welcome back to me making videos about whatever I want. You know, your boy has been through a couple of bad breakups, so I like watching breakup TV shows, and I find it really affirming to see other people go through the tough struggles that I've been through and have similar experiences to me or similar feelings, or I don't know, I just find it cathartic. So I've been watching this Netflix series called The Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce. It's about a messy divorce, and it's good, but there's some things that it just falls really short on, and it almost like sells itself short of being a great show. Usually when the show falls short, it feels like it's an issue with the writing. But I have to say, this show has a pro-level seasoned cast, and the actors really do sell the script, even at times where I can tell that they're struggling to do it, but they really do an incredible job. Just the actors alone are a reason to watch it, because it really is a great study of how to properly act. At this point, I want to tell you that there are going to be spoilers for the first and second season of the show, so if you're interested in watching the show and don't want spoilers, or just generally spoilers bother you, make sure you hit the like button on the way out. The show is based on a book following a character named Abby McCarthy. She's a self-help author. Abby McCarthy finds solace in her friends and adventures while she's going through a really painful divorce that splits her family. Really early in the show, you get to see the typical LA characters emerge, but the show really blows past those parts of their life to get into the real personalities of her friends, and I really appreciate that. You get to see past the LA. And this is part of the show that I think first intrigued me. It was commonplace to have fame in your life, whether you have a friend who's famous, or you might even be dating someone who has different, depending on who you're dating, different levels of fame, and it's just an element of life that is considered, but none of the characters' lives truly revolve around fame, and none of them seem obsessed with fame. It's just kind of part of the lifestyle out there. Having a glimpse into that attitude towards fame was really interesting. But beyond that, all of her friends are living their own lives, dating, doing whatever stuff they want to do. They all feel like real people. The main character, Abby McCarthy, is played by an actress, Lisa Edelstein, and Lisa herself is a career actress, and it shows. She's dynamic. She just always seems to know what to do in every scenario from an acting standpoint. She often carries entire scenes, and she makes Abby really, really dynamic and interesting to watch. She's super likable sometimes, whether she's having success in her career, and then really self-deprecating other times where she goes on giant tirades and ego trips and like calls all of her friends out on stuff that is totally unnecessary and like off base. She balances the two really well, and overall she's relatable and likable. If you haven't seen Marriage Story with Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver on Netflix, and you like this sort of breakup stories, go watch Marriage Story. Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce has that element to it. There's grit. It touches on parts of breakups that are just not talked about much. The really, really down moments, the deep insecurity that it can cause, and deep amounts of doubt that lead to hopes of getting back together, and the cringe of actually making an attempt at doing that when a breakup needs to just be something that's left in the past. All of those things are real feelings that people really go through, and it just continues to make the show more and more relatable. So those are the things that I liked about the show. Now let's get into the things that really were off-putting. For example, Abby's brother. Max starts out in the show as a very strong advocate of staying with your husband and never getting a divorce. And in some way, he's positioned as a heel to Abby, who is sort of considering getting the divorce. He often pushes her and tries to talk her into staying in her marriage. That was a great way to start, and it definitely added some contrast, although he's a little too pushy at times. They did a good job casting Max. He is a non-stereotypical gay man, and they sort of squandered that opportunity because they put him in this sort of like gay bestie trope to Abby, even though he starts out as being like disagreeing with her. He ends up just being that like He's always around to help whenever she needs him, and then he's just sort of gone all the rest of the time. They even initiate a really great storyline with him and his husband, where they start out, like life is perfect and they're always going to be married, and then they start having some troubles, and then his husband asks them to open the relationship. All of those things are super, super relevant, but they don't really give that story the time of day. He's too stuck in this gay bestie trope. He often disappears for like 5 episodes straight when they gave him a great story to tell. The movie Isn't It Romantic with Rebel Wilson even makes fun of this gay bestie trope with the character that they have named Johnny. He oftentimes makes jokes about how throwaway his character actually is. It's very self-aware, very meta, saying stuff like, "Okay, Booch, change out of whatever this is because I'm going to drop you off at the office on my way to no plans whatsoever." Joking that they didn't even bother to write enough story for his character to even have a place to go. Max could have been a character who had many different layers, who wanted to stay with his husband and not break up, but also didn't know how to get past this open relationship question. There was so much there, and it just basically by the end of the second season, it's like a non-existent story. Speaking of people disappearing from the show, Janine Roefe's in the show, and she's great. It's awesome to see her, but then she does leave the show. In the first season, she just sort of disappears, moves to Portland, and is quickly replaced by a childhood friend of Abby's who moves in with her like the very next episode. And even before I read up on the show, just watching it, I knew that this was a replacement. I wasn't that bothered by it. They don't try to disguise it in the writing. They don't try to make it feel natural at all. It was very abrupt. The new actor is really good, so I sort of didn't mind. What was more disruptive to the show are these rushed guest appearances like Abby's parents. They show up for one episode and they essentially have one thing that they want from her, which is for her to sign their vacation cabin, which is supposed to be her inheritance, back to them so that they can retire early or something like that. And having her parents there could have given us a window into Abby's childhood and what it was like for her growing up, but it's so rushed that the parents just feel like they're just antagonizing her constantly about this house, almost like bullying her. They're just in these scenes that just feel so awkward and uncomfortable. Another one of Abby's friends, Delia, is a powerful divorce attorney. She's a great example of a character that actually does get pushed to a new place in the show, and it's really interesting to watch. She starts out as an extremely independent woman who is a bit jaded about divorce, being that she is a divorce attorney, but she then falls in love with one of her clients, a very charming billionaire, and slowly over time we get to see her change to a woman whose personality is shaped just to meet her new fiance's needs, that by the end she's not really even herself anymore. This whole thing obviously ends in a huge dramatic wedding scene. How else could you possibly do this? But it was actually a pretty believable storyline and pretty relatable. A lot of people in relationships change for their partners. It was a great example of how this can actually go about happening, slowly and over time. And there are several examples of them taking interesting storylines and then just not elevating them from a writing standpoint. Another example of this is one of Abby's friends, Phoebe, is dating a man named JD. He's an artist, he's a painter, and he describes himself as extremely shy. Shy to the level where he really clams up and he can't really even have a functional conversation in certain social scenarios where there's many people around. I have no idea if they intended him to reflect the autism spectrum at all, but certainly in the way that it's portrayed, it definitely is reminiscent of the autism spectrum. And here I thought, what a great opportunity to have even more representation on Netflix of the autism spectrum. But I kind of wish that they had written the character that way and just named it. It would have been another way to make this show socially relevant. As a final example of how the show falls just a little short of greatness, each episode has a rule associated with it, like rule number 23, never lie to the kids, or rule number 174, never trust anyone who charges by the hour. After watching many episodes, I kind of found that these rules are really just episode titles. What I would rather see is the rule for each episode just be interlaced and intertwined into all of the stories, and really connecting all of the stories from one friend in Abby's circle to Abby's ex-husband, and each of them learning a lesson in each episode that's relevant to the rule. And that's just not, the show's just not written that way. That would have taken a lot more time and a lot more finesse. So why even have each episode be a rule? Like, why not just name the episode Never Lie to the Kids? The whole rule concept implies that there's going to be some reason for it to be a rule. I just wish they had pushed that concept way farther. There's a lot of examples of moments where I wish things had just been pushed further. But in the end, Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce is a really good show. I would recommend it to any of my friends, especially if you've been through a bad breakup. It's absolutely worth watching. Now, subscribe to my channel, and let's just say hi to my cat.